Welcome to Goldfish on Games and Cover Disc Face Off, where we put the discs of various magazines against each other to see who had the best. And today we're looking at October of 1992. And our magazines are Amiga Format, CU Amiga, and the One for Amiga. Fight! And first off we have Amiga Format issue 39. And being Amiga Format, it couldn't just have games, so we've got Devpak. That's right, a full environment for making your own software and games for the Amiga. Now this is version 2.5, which I think at this point was relatively old, which is why they were giving it away for free. But it did mean that anyone who wanted to get into assembly programming could just buy Amiga Format and get going, and they even included some tutorials in the pages for you to follow. And on top of that, Bullfrog even provided some demo code for you to mess around with and try out. So all you had to do was open it up, assemble it, and then run it. Which I'll speed up a little bit, because even though this is a relatively fast compiler, it's still a bit long for a video that's meant to be about games and cover discs. But I think this is pretty cool to show off. As you can see, this gives you a man that you can run around the screen, which is quite cool. Now let's skip over this and go on to the real meat of this magazine, which is the game demos. One of the things I liked about Amiga Format at this time was the disc was actually bootable into Workbench, and you could then pick what you wanted to mess around with from a Workbench screen, which was so much nicer than some of the custom menus or having to type out the name of the demos that you wanted to run. And quite often they had custom icons as well, which is quite cool. This disc comes with two main game demos, Pinball and Caesar, as well as a few little tools for you to mess around with. And where else can we start but with some pinball? Quicksilver Pinball, with what is possibly the most colourful title screen of all time. Now let's just get into the game to check out its physics.
Okay.
And I think it's clear to say that that's not the best ball physics you'll ever see in a pinball game. Which I have to say did surprise me a little bit, as I actually remembered playing this quite often back in the day, as this was actually the very first magazine and cover disc that we got for our Amiga. And I actually remembered it being quite good. But then I didn't really have anything else to compare it to, as this was the very first computer pinball game that I ever played. The table itself actually does have quite a few features for you to play around with, so it's not all bad. But if you're going to play a pinball game, I definitely wouldn't go with this one. Next up is a small advertisement for Real Things, which is a bit of software for taking video sequences and turning them into line drawings. Now the fact that it was difficult enough to get video sequences onto your computer, turning it into a line sequence, well, it looks cool, but I don't think it's all that useful. And to show off the software, they have this bit of animation, so you can see what it can do, which annoyingly, when you load it up from Workbench, doesn't really give you much indication that anything's happening, just occasionally the cursor will flash. They also provide that line drawing as an anim brush, so you can use it in Deluxe Paint 3 or 4 if you like. But I think it's time to go on to the final demo on this disc, which is Caesar. Which is effectively a city building game. As you can see, I've cleared out an area, I've laid down some roads, and even put some houses and an aqueduct. As with most of these games, the goal is to keep growing your city so you can earn more money, because you've got taxes and stuff that you have to pay back to Rome. Which includes dealing with all the various needs of your citizens, as well as dealing with the barbarians, as well as other disasters, such as houses catching on fire. Some of which is made a bit harder in the demo, as those buildings don't actually work, but you can mess around and try and build up your city, as limited as it is. But as we can see, you can set up your industry and get people working and trying to earn some money. It even has the advisors, but those are again quite limited in the demo. And that is pretty much the bulk of what was on the Amiga Format discs. There was also a utility that allowed you to switch between 50 and 60Hz mode, but with so many of the games being made for 50Hz, it didn't really make too much of a difference. Or at least it never in my experience. So let's move on to CU Amiga Issue 42. which, like the previous magazine, has 2 discs and one of them also has some software. But it's also got a few games, as well as this lovely little menu. So let's start off with Cybernetics, which certainly starts off pretty strong with this great bit of music and a nice bit of animation in the background of the title screen. But then this is a proper shareware release, so if you do enjoy it, you're meant to buy it afterwards. So its quality really has to shine from the very beginning if it's going to get anyone to actually purchase it. The game itself is pretty much Defender meets Asteroids. You have to fly across the screen just like Defender, but you've also got to take out asteroids that will break into smaller bits just like Asteroids. There are multiple sectors for you to play in, as well as lots of different weapon upgrades, and the action is fast. Oh, it's so very fast. And on top of the rocks, there's also other things you'll have to deal with, like the ships. Now some of them are quite useful, as you can use them to gain weapon upgrades. You do this by shooting the asteroids, which will sometimes release these little blue pellets, which if you collect will give you some bonus points, but if they collect, you can then shoot them to gain the upgrade. But if you hang around these levels too long, waves of enemies will start to show up. And these will just keep coming as long as you're in the sector. To complete a sector, you have to destroy everything that's currently in it. So if you allow too many waves to show up, you're going to have to take down all of them before you can then move on to the next sector. There are lots of different weapon types, as well as enemies that you'll have to deal with, but they can all be pretty deadly if you let them. So all in all, a pretty decent little shareware title. It's fast, it's fun, and it's got a lot of scope, even if it isn't all that original, as it's just a mashup of 2 other games. But I'd definitely take this over a direct copy of someone else's, like the next title, which is Motherlode, which might give you a hint at what game this is currently trying to copy. Loadrunner isn't a series that I've had that much experience with, but as far as I'm aware this does have its own unique levels, and even from the beginning it seems to be pretty hard, as it took me quite a lot of attempts to make it past the very first level. It seems reasonably well made and nicely animated, but I can't really say there's much new added to the game. So let's very briefly take a look at the software that's also on this disc, which includes the Money Program, which is an accounts software. So yeah, not all that useful, particularly this day and age, but might have been quite nice back in the day, if you had a business for example, or if you just wanted to take charge of the family accounts. Or well, with us lot, it probably trying to track all the games that we bought, and working out how much we spent on our retro hobby. But very much not being game focused, let's move on to the next bit of software, which is effectively a dictionary with a bunch of word processing software attached to the side of it. Not the type of word processing that will allow you to make a document, but one that would allow you to check it over afterwards, like running a spell check on it, which actually would have been quite useful for me being a dyslexic. I've never been able to spell very well. But this demo actually comes with quite a small number of words, so it's not going to be the most useful thing unless you actually shell out to get a much larger dictionary. But this can be used to help you with some games, such as being able to help you solve crossword puzzles, but only if the words actually show up in its dictionary, which as we stated before, in this version is pretty slim. But enough about this, I think it's time we moved on to the commercial demos, and this actually had 2. With the first one being Lotus 3. Is it me, or does that music sound a little slow? I'm sure it's faster in the full release. This demo is actually quite unique, as one of the things it wanted to show off was the new Rex system, which was a fancy way of generating brand new levels for you to play. But if they gave you full control over it, then you would have been able to play a huge number of levels and never needed to buy the full game. So instead, they have automated the main menu so it shows you the process of creating a custom level, and then you get to play it afterwards. Now this is quite the long sequence, and at the end of it you get to play that single level which is recreated every single time. They really wanted to show off all the new additions to the game, like the new cars as well as the new audio tracks. As in the full game, you get to select which bit of music you want to listen to while driving, or you can listen to sound effects, which is what the demo does. When you finally get into the race, it's actually a relatively short 3-stage track, with high winds. So it can be a little challenging, but not so much that you'd actually fail it. And to be honest, I think the race might be shorter than the demo sequence that was showing off all the new features itself. So it was definitely an interesting way of showing off the game, but it would have been nice if it actually had a few more tracks. And the final demo for CU Amiga is Putty, a game that I've always thought is a bit of an Amiga classic, though I know not everyone agrees with me. And if this demo was your first experience with the game, I can understand why that might be the case, as this one isn't the best level that you'll come across. It's a little bit confusing and there's a lot going on, though to be honest that is very common of Putty. This is a very colourful and very active game that tends to have lots of stuff happening all at the same time. This is the only level that's in this demo, so they have tried to pack it full of all the various features that you can expect to find in the main game, such as items falling from the sky, being able to absorb various creatures to increase your pliability, as well as having to save those pesky little robots. But one of his best features is the fact that he can take on the form of various creatures. It's a fun, if not particularly long demo for the game, but it is interesting to see they actually made this level custom for CU Amiga. Or at least that's what I'm assuming based on the huge logos that they've included. And I feel it might be time to move on to our final magazine, which was the one for Amiga Issue 49. And look at it, 3 whole discs. And on disc 1 we have Team 17 with their latest game, which will blow everyone away. It's the name on everyone's lips, Assassin. So the demo itself starts off with this slideshow. It will show you some pictures of the game, and then some text explaining what you can expect from it. And you can just hit fire at any point to go into the demo itself, which turns out is only 2 minutes long. So they give you this absolutely huge level and barely give you enough time to really scratch the surface. But because of the size of the level, you can go around and explore it quite a bit, in those chunks obviously. There's also a lot of baddies for you to take down, but you don't really have to worry too much about them taking you out, as you have no health in this demo, as they cannot hurt you at all, though you can hurt them with your boomerang, which I always thought was a little bit weedy, and didn't really have much of a range, which I guess is where all those special abilities come in handy, though in the demo you are just limited to 2 of them. I do think those 2 minutes might be a little bit too limiting, especially when they don't even show you how much time you got left on the screen, but it is pretty fun to play. The next disc and demo I think has a lot more weight behind it, as we're checking out KGB. This is a game by Cryo, who did the absolutely amazing Dune, so it is a bit of a surprise that I never actually got around to playing the full title. But after messing around with the demo, I think I might have to rectify that, because this was actually a lot of fun. It's a bit of a point and click adventure. It seems to have quite the detailed conversation system, where you can chat to most of the people that you'll come across. and it won't be long before you're given your first mission, which is to investigate a murder. I have to say, I don't think this music particularly suits the game, and as far as I'm aware, I don't think it actually made it into the final release, but I'm sure one of you in the comments will let me know. The investigation itself is handled through a pretty clever point-and-click system. By default, it will use the smart cursor, which will actually change the verb that you'll use on the various items. But if it's not picked the right one, you can actually just right-click and select what it is you want to use. But to be honest, most of the time it seems to get it right. You have to be thorough but also relatively quick with your investigation, as you have to make it back to give you a report. And if you do it well enough, he will give you some important information. It's always fun when devs play a little with their demos, and I think it's time to move on to the final disc of this magazine as well as the episode, so let's see what treasures we have for us. And what it seems to be is a third commercial demo as well as a shareware and PD title. So let's check out Fire Force. Which, just like many of the other demos that we've seen today, is just a single level. But it does allow you to go through the main game flow, even if you can't use the armory. That bit has been locked off. Your objective is to find that guy in the beige beret and take him out. Now this is actually a game that I own, though I will say I've never really gotten all that far. To be completely honest, I don't think I've ever made it past the first level. So today is the day that I decided I was going to complete this first mission. And it turns out you actually have a number of weapons that you can use from the very beginning, which I didn't realise when I played it back in the day. I think mostly because the controls are a little bit odd. And I tried to play it only using the knife, but when you've got the assault rifle, things become a lot easier. And to bring it up, you actually have to use the F5 key. In what's become a bit of a theme in these demos, you are timed. You only have a limited amount of time to make it to the bad guy, take him out and get to the exit. This isn't a unique feature for the demo, this is something you have to deal with in the main game as well. So this does mean it might take you a few attempts to actually finish a level, because you'll have to explore it to find where the bad guys are. And the levels are actually set up in a way that you'll have to investigate a number of different buildings. But once you've mapped out your route, you're pretty much good to be able to go and find him straight away when you then play it again. Something else you'll have to do in this game is try and collect ammo and weapons from the fallen opponents. Which wasn't something I knew how to do, because for some reason I didn't have a manual for my copy. So at least this demo actually has the full controls in the magazine. Now I think it's fair to say that this game was more than a little inspired by Rambo, particularly when you decide to use the knife. I remember that being one of the main reasons we used to talk about this game. And with a little bit of perseverance, making sure I fully read the dossier at the start, and replaying the level multiple times, I finally completed it. As it seems the extraction point was moved between the demo and the final game. On top of that change, the game also got a bunch of extra graphics for the final release, including dead people hanging out of windows. And I think it's time to check out the final game, which if you're lucky you can actually read through all that fancy colour work, Sub-Attack. Which turns out to be our second game that was inspired by a classic arcade game, as you use your torpedoes to take out boats at varying distances away from you, and your firepower isn't the fastest, so you have to carefully time your shots, as the boats might be slow or hyperspeed, so it can become quite tricky. To complete a level, you have to take out 20 ships, and you lose if 20 of them reach from one side of the screen to the other. So as you can imagine, on later levels where you do have a lot of those small fast ships, it can be quite difficult. It's a little bit simple, and for some reason it seems to return you to the game select screen when you finish, but it is fun enough. Though I'm not entirely sure why this needed a 1MB Amiga. there were far more advanced half-megabyte games around. And seeing that we've already checked out Cybernetics on CU Amiga, there's no point going into it again here, as it's the exact same shareware title. So all that's left is to rank the magazines to see which one had the best set of cover discs. And as much as it pains me, even though it was the very first magazine I got, third has to go to Amiga Format. Devpak is pretty great and all, but I don't think most of the people who bought the magazine would ever have used it. And when it came to the demos, there were just 2 of them. And Quicksilver, yeah, it was a game that was very quickly overshadowed by much better pinball games. Second place ended up going to CU Amiga. As again, those programs were nice, but they were quite niche. But it did at least have a couple of great demos and a few PD titles. And so first place has to go to the one for Amiga. Just having more discs is not an automatic win, as a number of you commenters mentioned in the last episode. But in this instance they managed to fit it full of great demos as well as a few PD titles, so I think it is a worthy winner. So did I get this right? Do you disagree with me? Well, let me know down in the comments. And until next time, I've been the Goldfish, that was October of 1992, and this has been Goldfish on Games. Thank you for watching Cover Disc Face Off. I hope you enjoyed it, and if you did, you should be able to find 2 other videos on the screen right now. Or you might even want to subscribe or even ring that bell icon, because that's what I've been told that you need to do. So until next time, thank you and goodbye.